Welcome back to the Are You Being Real show. I'm sitting with my dear friend, the one and only Scott Norton. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Mark.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm super inspired by you. So this has been an episode in the making for a while.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. We've been crisscrossing the globe, passing each other as ships in the night. And finally, here we intersect in Los Angeles.
Here we are trading WhatsApp messages every few days. It's kind of like our little SOS.
Yes. Our Calendly, beacon.
But Scott, I want to dive right into it because you're an inspiring man with so much wisdom. So I want to make sure that we give all the listeners as much of it as possible. But you're an incredibly inspiring man and super smart and creative as well. So I wanted to kind of tap into your master brain. So you are the co-founder of Sir Kensington's and you make amazingly all natural condiments.
That's right. Yeah.
Ketchup
condiments
and mayonnaise and
as we say.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, you flatter me, Mark. And as we'll talk about today, everything I've learned, has been through trying and failing and getting up again. And I've really been blessed to have an amazing team, amazing supportive people around me. But I will also accept your wonderful compliments. Sure
thing. Well, I wanted to have you on the show for those reasons. And then as well with Sir Kensington's, you've built this massive brand where, if you're tuning in, you've probably seen Sir Kensington's products on the shelves at your favorite grocery store, especially if it's a health-oriented store. And you started in 2010?
We did, yes.
So not even that long ago, and you sold it to Unilever a couple of years ago.
That's right.
So in true, it's an incredible story. We'll get into that later in the episode, but I wanted to have you on the show for many different reasons. One of them being that you created a story around a condiment that really resonated with people. And the only way I believe that you can really reach and move people is through authenticity. So I wanted to really tap into your wisdom as to what it means to tell an authentic story and how to be authentic through storytelling in order to get your message across and to move people. And then as well is you have disrupted the ketchup industry or the condiment industry, getting away from some of those high fructose corn syrup products and are bringing all natural products to people. So I wanted to ask you about what we should be real about in terms of condiments and the food that we put in our bodies.
Yeah, I would love to share that.
Being aware of the source of where our food comes from. So the way that I open up all these episodes is I invite my guests to share an authentic story. We call them the Am I Being Real story, an opportunity for you to take a look at your own authenticity. So without further ado, what is your Am I Being Real story?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Mark. And, I started, as you said, this company in 2010, and we first had the idea in 2008. When we were still in college, actually, at the time. And we began by having this realization that food was clearly changing. Every aisle of the supermarket saw innovation, and it saw a movement towards better for you products, towards the fact that people were demanding more from what they were eating. And really all across the supermarket, you could tell that people were looking for more and demanding more. But in condiments, specifically ketchup, that was an area that had really been left behind. As you said, the offerings out there were high fructose corn syrup with concentrate tomatoes and a lot of ingredients that you wouldn't necessarily find in your pantry. And so sort of looking at really first as a business opportunity, we said, there's a white space here. And there's an opportunity to create something that's in line with our values of food. And also an opportunity to sort of shape the way that America eats a bit, this product that people eat on a daily basis. If we can make a small change and move that forward, then that would be something that really earns its place in culture and makes a positive improvement to the way people are eating. So it was both, and I think the way that I think about business is it's more creative than it is competitive. And I think my grandfather has this quote, if you want to be successful, don't be a go-getter, be a go-giver. So I always try to think about, if you want to create value, if you want to create value for yourself, you have to think about what is the value that I'm creating for others to really earn that back. Which is, I think, that's part of my business philosophy that I really encourage. I started the company with a couple of friends, and it was two of us as co-founders in 2010 that started doing it full time in New York. And we wore every hat. We did everything together, from sales to fundraising. And I was, because I was, I sort of fancy myself as a creative, and I am a storyteller really at heart, and I'm very visual. I took the mantle of CMO, and I was the head of marketing. I loved what I did in terms of the storytelling of Sir Kensington, which was this character that we created. He's totally fictional, and he was someone that we created to represent the values and the personality of us as a company. So we said, okay, if we're going to be noticed on the shelf, we have to be dramatically different than Heinz, for instance. If they're going to be plastic, then let's choose glass. If they're going to be squeezing, let's be scooping, like a high-end European preserve. And if they're Americana, sort of the image of the roadside diner and fast food, and totally ubiquitous, well, what's the opposite of that? Let's be English. So we created this character, Sir Kensington, who is a very sort of posh and rarefied English knight, Victorian naturalist, and a spice trader. And we created this huge backstory for him. And he's evolved over the years, which I'll talk a bit about. But I love kind of creating that sense of that sense of wonder and world building that came with Sir Kensington. And over the years, we started growing the team, and hired some people to work with us, on the marketing team, and of course on the sales teams and other teams like that. And as we started growing as a company, I really found that my talents and my abilities were under pressure. That even though I was the founder, and at the time the CMO, that what the job was becoming was not really suited for my skill set, wasn't suited for my abilities, and frankly, in many cases, wasn't suited for where I truly wanted to go and where I wanted to give my gifts. But my Are You Being Real story is that I didn't realize that consciously at the time. And it created a lot of pressure for the people around me that counted on me. It created a lot of pressure for myself because in many ways I had authority. But that authority was more driven by what I happened to be good at, or the inclinations that I had. And also my general frugality, I would say, which is frugality is not a common trait of marketers. Marketers usually like to spend money.
Right, yeah.
Whereas I think I would say generationally, I always want to hang on to it. And so that meant that we were never taking big shots, right? And to earn great rewards, you also have to take great risks. And you also have to think very long term about those investments. That's really necessary in building a business and building a brand. But it wasn't comfortable for me. It really came to a head when I had a really tough conversation with my co-founder and my partner, who was essentially said that this isn't working out and that we needed to think about it. And it was hard for me. It was really hard for me in that moment because it was my identity. It was my ego. It was everything from this is how I introduce myself at parties and strike up conversations to this is how I pay my rent, right? And it was the relationships and the reputation that I had with everyone from our board to investors to employees to friends. And I felt embarrassed by that it wasn't really a fit, and I didn't really have the objective and kind of cognitive perspective and emotional perspective to recognize that there needed to be an evolution of myself as the company evolved as well. And that really led me on a path of putting a lot more intentionality around being aware of how do I come off to other people? How can I take a more objective perspective? And I think most importantly, how do I understand what the right overlap is between the gifts that I have to give and what the world needs? As the story continued, I did a lot of thinking, and we did a lot of thinking, and really with the wonderful support of my partner, Mark, and with the support of the company, we, and some real fact finding, realized that there was a role for me to play in really forging helping forge and really being a sort of a sounding board and a synthesizer and a condenser to move into the storytelling of who are we as a company, not necessarily in terms of sales activation or in what might traditionally be called marketing, but more organization building, codifying and defining the values of the company, a sense of purpose for the company, and really what can be many define as culture. But culture can also be, how the military wins wars. Culture is also why Google is what it is today, right? In terms of the impact that they have and the scale that they've reached. Culture is also, it's a story that we tell ourselves about who we are. Culture is what creates the boundaries and the borders of nations. It's culture is how we eat. And organizational culture is how we unite people together under a shared sense of purpose that answers the fundamental and everlasting question of how am I connected to something greater than myself? And, working in this field and doing a lot of thinking, and also just being a general kind of proponent of this idea that everything is connected, realizing more and more that great institutions, organizations, and call them brands, which is really an organized form of storytelling and world building, connects the internal culture of who the people are that work there and that spend their time there and that contribute to moving a vision forward. That is very much a connected energy to who are the people that are customers, that are enrolling in it, right? That are applying for jobs there, that are willing to be suppliers and bear with the company in times of challenge and negotiation. And that, I think, that connection between internal culture and external culture was ultimately what I learned from this experience. And it was really hard at the time, though. And I was really lucky to have the support, but I had to be real in my recognition that it was in some ways like losing a job, right? It was losing a job, but it was a job that I created. So
kind of having your baby taken away from you.
Yes, exactly. And I spent some time in the woods, basically in a cabin alone after taking copious notes and interviewing everyone from investors and board members to other entrepreneurs and members of the team that were, really close to me, and collating and synthesizing kind of what we needed now as a company. And I've really tried to stay true to that. And of course it is of course always easier said than done, whether it was marketing or whether it was really sort of forging and protecting a culture. Execution is really where the magic is, which is still very hard and, continues to be challenged, as any company, any even great company, has times of cultural challenge. It's something that I'm really dedicated to, and that I think separates us and sets us apart. So, that was the moment where I really had to get real with myself.
Wow. That's so fascinating. Thank you for sharing. And how long ago was that?
That was at the end of 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're well beyond that at this point.
I think I'm well beyond it in the sense that I don't feel like, pain from it or challenge from it, but it's also with me every day, in the sense that, I have to remind myself, how do I gain objectivity? How do I ask the right questions? How do I solicit feedback? And how do I understand, how we can always be looking around the corner of what the company needs, now versus what the company needed 10 months ago.
I got to ask you, so you were out at this cabin after you interviewed investors and a bunch of people. I'm curious to hear what you came up with. Were there like a set of core values that you installed? And then how has that, I guess, unfolded and come to life within the organization?
So I think that one thing I've learned is, if I were to go to this cabin and actually write the values and come back like Moses with, the stone tablets, then how credible is that, right? Then those are really my values. I think what I came back with was an idea of process.
Okay.
Of how do we actually ask the right questions of the team to truly reflect what are the values that describe who we are. So I came back with knowing a need, like we needed to write these down, and of course have an inkling, but really then go through talking about execution, the process of surveying and listening and clarifying and, polishing. And then actually we very recently updated these values. We left like 3 of them the same, and one of them we ended up moving forward and switching to something I'm really excited about. but obviously it makes sense to review them and revise them, but it's got to be a collective process. Otherwise it's not authentic. There's this saying called the IKEA effect. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So, and even if you had, I would have explained it because not everyone out there has. But these researchers did the study where they brought an piece of IKEA furniture, let's call it a chair, to someone's home that knew they were participating in a study. And they brought an assembled chair to someone's house and they said, okay, we're going to give you this chair and we're going to check back in with you in a month's time. And the other households, they brought the flat pack furniture, right? The same chair, but it hadn't been assembled. And they asked the participants to assemble the furniture. And they said, we'll come back in a month. They come back in a month. The people that got the assembled chair that was already put together, they were asked, would you sell us back this chair? What would you charge for this chair? And they were like, I don't know, like $20. Like, I could just give it to you. You gave it to me. I don't really want it. It doesn't really fit with my decor. The other group, when they were asked, hey, this chair that you assembled, what would you charge us if you were to sell it back to us? They were like, I don't want to sell this chair. I love this chair, right? I built this chair. The values that they were going to charge were much, much higher, and they were loath to let it go, because when we build something, we put part of ourselves in it, right? It becomes it has part of us inside it. And so just in the same process of creating those values, when you do that collaboratively, collectively, then it becomes everyone's values versus my values.
That is so interesting. It makes so much sense as well.
Yeah.
The things that we feel like we have invested our time and energy into and have built, we take a little bit of a proprietary stake in them. So that certainly makes sense to me. I'm curious.
You're a very good active listener.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm curious because I had a team that I managed when I worked at Showtime, and I give a lot of talks on this type of stuff. And I'm just curious to hear your take on the balance as like a manager where you show you care about the people in your organization, yet at the same time are still incentivizing people to get the job done and to do excellent work. So I'm kind of curious to know what that balance is for you.
I think this is really one of the hardest things, because I think high performing team is really the metaphor that I like to think about, versus family. A lot of people use that word family, and I don't think that that's right for the office. And on the other side, I don't think it's just like corporate mercenary force either, right? I don't think it's just a kind of a company, so to speak. And it's really hard because so much of business can seem antisocial. Like when you first learn how to do sales, it's like take everything you've learned about social interaction and throw it at the door. Right, because when someone says they don't want something, you just have to ignore them, right? Be like, if I were to say like, hey Mark, you want to have dinner tonight? You're like, no man, I'm busy. Like it's cool. I'll be like, okay, another time. Maybe when I'm back in LA. But as a salesperson, you have to be like, well, what if we had dinner at 6:30 p.m.? Okay, what about 9:30? Like, what if I brought chicken? Okay, you don't need chicken. What if I brought steak? And it's like, stop bothering me. But like, if you do that enough, it's gonna work, right? And I think that you have to think about at the same time like balancing these things that are like these odd sort of non-social behaviors, like everyone kind of having bosses and coming to work in the same place, and like everyone is paid different amounts, and everyone has different kind of habits when it comes to the hours that they work. And how do you normalize that, right? It's really hard. And I don't know if I'm even the best at this, but I would say really award people and shower praise and advance people on the ones that you really do feel live the culture. You don't want to treat anyone like less than human, but you also, the ones that are really taking the values to heart and also taking the performance to heart, make sure that you're rewarding them and advancing them in their career. We talk about our purpose as a company with an uppercase P, which is how we talk about that food is the fundamental human connector, and that we all have to work as a company to defend the superpowers of food and the dignity of food. And that's that's not a business goal, right? And you may have many people that believe in that and live those values and live that purpose, but may not necessarily be contributing to the bottom line by doing that. And that's where purpose with a lowercase p comes in, right? Little p purpose, which is, why do we have the right to be on the shelf at Whole Foods? Why do we have the right to be in someone's fridge? Why does the world need another salad dressing or another ketchup? You have to, and are you affordable enough, right? That's purpose with lowercase p, which is like, do you actually kind of make sense on a logical level and on a functional utility level in people's lives? And I really think you have to nail both, right? And I think every team member has to have a sense of purpose with a capital P, a higher calling. They also have to deliver purpose with a lowercase p, which is, what am I here to do in my job every day? And the products and the brand has to have that same duality of both the kind of higher order value and also the blunt economic value that ultimately that is rung through the register at the stores that are our customers.
I really dig that. I think there's polarity to everything. It's all like in our perspective and the way that we choose to look at things. So I like that you zoom out and you look at it like more of the macro, like what is the bigger problem that we're solving, which oftentimes, people believe in. It's like tied to a value in terms of, in this case, like having good food and putting good products in your body, to the micro, which is like how it's going to affect, my everyday life. Where am I going to get it from?
Right.
And so forth. So
yeah, I think
like
you got to
that.
have both.
Yeah. When I was hearing you talk about the values in your company, something that I've been playing around with a lot is this idea of kindfluence. And that we are going to have an influence on each other, whether we like it or not. Naturally, there's a cause and effect to everything. So kindfluence to me is based on 3 criteria, which is being caring, being honest, and being giving. And I see that being able to work both ways, from leadership, communicating with employees, as well as employees getting the job done and communicating with leadership. So I see it really being twofold, but I think like caring and being actually honest and real creates the connection, and then being giving, like we all go to work to get the job done so we can, live the lifestyle of our choice, but it all comes back once again to giving. So I think that's really beautiful. And
I like that, kindfluence.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. To me, when put that together, I want to kind of segue back into storytelling, because you are a master storyteller. I mean,
I'm an amateur. I'm just beginning.
I consider you to be a master storyteller. So we actually, for everyone who's tuning in, we met on a storytelling trip in Israel, and shout out to anyone who was on our trip who's tuning in. And you got up in front of the group a number of times and told stories, and you're so captivating. So I'm curious to hear your take on some of like your favorite elements of storytelling, or what you always try to incorporate, what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'll pass the baton to you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think in terms of like storytelling hacks or like approach to storytelling, it's really, I mean, this sounds so basic, but a great hack is thinking about beginning, middle, and end. And that's whether it's like a PowerPoint presentation, or whether whether it's a story that you're telling to a friend, or something that you're recounting, or a message that you're trying to get across, thinking about what are the 3 phases of this journey that I'm going to take this person on. What establishes the situation, what tension is created, and then how is that tension resolved? I think that flow is like one of those fundamental kind of Joseph Campbell hero's cycle, which obviously the hero's cycle has many different parts to it. And if you're not familiar, it's worth Googling and looking it up. But those really, the 3 acts, right, are there kind of for a reason. And I think that mapping your story that you're going to tell and say, well, what's the beginning, what's the middle, and what's the end, will help you have a natural flow to it. I think another one is using your voice in a powerful way with pregnant pauses. So using the moments of silence on stage, because you will, once you actually get people's attention and you're silent, people will be on the edge of their chair and they're like, what's next? And then you can use those to kind of create these like points of clarity. And I think another one is, I always like to take like lessons from history. So like whether it's the quote from the grandpa, or something from, the ancient Greeks, or a Sun Tzu quote or something like that. It's always nice to kind of, in a way, like, give sort of like don't just take my word for it. Like, I'm just really retelling a story. I'm taking a concept and I'm making it relevant. I'm applying it to the situation. I think that's a powerful technique of storytelling as well.
Awesome. And then anything to add in terms of the elements of authenticity, since that's what this show is all about?
Yeah, authenticity of storytelling is funny because, oftentimes what comes off as authentic is actually it's performing authenticity. And sometimes authenticity in storytelling comes actually from exaggeration and what's that other word that embellishment. Which is I think funny. But also, the other sort of on the flip side of that excitement and that embellishment that needs to come with that ethic is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I would say, especially when you're telling personal stories, but even when you're telling professional stories, and especially if you're trying to persuade, if you give a one-sided argument and you don't actually speak to the skeptical voice in someone's head, or you don't show vulnerability, then it will be an us versus them presentation of the audience, towards the audience, versus if you show vulnerability, you'll be human, right? And you will be you'll have that shared space of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And if you even doubt your own message and you actually say, well, I've thought about the flip side of this argument, and then you go back to kind of making the argument, people will say, oh, well, he did, that was addressed. Mm-hmm. And it's not in the conscious brain, right? It's mm-hmm. actually like in the subconscious brain, and more like the center and connected to the nervous system. Yeah. That storytelling and trust, they have a very, conflicted relationship at mm-hmm. times. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you talk about authenticity with Sir Kensington's, because actually Sir Kensington is made up. Right. Yeah. Right. He's actually, the facts are not authentic facts, but the ethos is authentic. Right. And so sometimes you need these to I think to tell great stories, you need to actually like clarify the sort of more fundamental truth, sure, rather than convey the facts. Sure. And this is why we're in such a interesting time in like the media right now, and such a bizarre time, because like, there are so many leaders that are speaking to a truth that people feel, but they're not doing it with facts, right? They're not doing it with the truth, but they're doing it with things that feel so goddamn true, right? To many people. Mm-hmm. And that's really how you motivate people, is with feelings, not with thoughts. So I guess that would be the final sort of I think the great storytelling hack, which I was taught a while back, is before you tell the story and before you plan the story, what is the feeling that you want your audience walking away with? That is going to clarify how you deliver the story.
A few more questions for you. I know that two of the big words that you use in Sir Kensington's marketing is two values, actually. Charisma, I guess, I don't know if that's really a value, but charisma and integrity.
Integrity and charm.
Integrity and charm. Okay, integrity and charm. So I'm curious to know, what do those words mean to you personally?
Well, so we our mission at Sir Kensington's is to reimagine ordinary and overlooked food with fearless integrity and charm. And it's a pretty lengthy statement, but every word has meaning. And I think, integrity and charm together is sort of the yin and yang of what we aim to represent. Integrity itself is really abiding by your own morals and by your own values. And integrity is about everything in the food sense, from the purity of it to how it's grown, harvested, the sustainability, how people are treated in the supply chain, the nutrition of it, all the kind of like hard stuff. Mm-hmm. And then charm is that a recognition that food nourishes us, but it also entertains us. And it's also something that we have joy around. It's something that we celebrate. It's something that is a culture and art, and it's beautiful, and it's a really emotional thing. And if you just have the integrity piece, then you end up kind of being like the United Nations World Food Program or Food and Agriculture Report. And if you just have charm, then you're like, sweet sundaes and Oreos and sugar and slapstick memes. But integrity and charm and balance together, I think of it kind of as like Bill Nye the Science Guy, where you're learning, but you're also being entertained. It's education and entertainment together. And I think that like a lot of what I love why I love storytelling is that it's education that is masquerading as entertainment, right? So it's kind of the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down kind of thing. And so we really aim as a company to balance that integrity and charm, because it has to have the substance of integrity, but in order for a message to get out there, it has to have the resonance of charm.
I think that's so good. And I definitely see how that works conceptually in terms of like storytelling with business. But I think having that balance between integrity and charm within our own lives is so valuable as well. Because I know like having values can be rigid, and they can feel like we can feel enslaved to, you know, our moral codes.
We
and
should all
being
over ourselves.
So good, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the charm adds that level of playfulness.
Yeah.
And creativity and spontaneity to something that's more rigid. So.
Yeah, and humanity, really. I mean, the humanizing and the humanity is like, that's a really important part of it that allows us to have that, you know, compassion, the playfulness.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So cool. And you mentioned your son, and I know you're a great dad. I hear you talking about him so much, and I'm sure you've taught him so many lessons in his, you know, how old is he?
Oh, he's 2 years. I don't know how many lessons have landed. Yeah.
So that leads to the question: if there was one lesson that you'd want to land with him, what would it be?
Yeah, I write a letter to my son on his birthday every year. So I wrote it when he was born and one last year. And my letter this year is on self-compassion. And I think that is talking about like shitting all over ourselves. Yeah. If we, obviously there's many lessons to teach him, but that's something that I really struggle with. Is I hold myself to a really high standard, and to some point, like, that doesn't mean that I'm amazing. It means that I'm actually constantly falling short of my own expectations. And I can be really hard on myself, and that can create a lot of pain and basically drains energy from the things I do want to spend my time on and how I want to feel alive. And I think if there's a lesson I can impart to my son, it's really self-compassion, because we'll never really be who we want to be by comparing ourselves to other people. We really have to determine what is our own yardstick, and also, frankly, maybe stop measuring every outcome, right? I mean, there's some things that are really important, like knowing your values and living your values and showing up for other people and practicing, what'd you call it?
Kindfluence.
Practicing kindfluence. But we also, at the end of the day, we have to be empathetic with ourselves, which is, I don't think it's very common.
So yeah, it's easier said than done in this world where, you know, we're constantly looking for gratification and acknowledgement and
setting really high expectations.
Yeah, I definitely am very guilty of that. It certainly drives me, and practicing compassion and just living each day to the fullest is something that I am actively trying to practice, and the people around me are consistently encouraging me to do.
Yeah. Well, when my son learns, he can teach both of us.
Great. Sign me up for that course. I'll pay double. So, Scott, as we wrap up the episode here, I know you have some exciting new stuff that's coming with Sir Kensington. So I wanted to give you the platform to share what we can expect coming. Oh, yeah. As well as what we can do to support you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Yeah, we so to date as a company, we started with ketchup, and we then expanded to mayonnaise and mustard, and last year salad dressings. And we were thinking about how are ways that we can create a more direct and intimate connection with our community and with our customers, and what are ways that we can actually use our business as a platform to make talking about that integrity really ethical decisions around a supply chain that in food is so often hidden, right? And we think about, like, if we think about farms and like farmers, the people that actually grow and pick your food are not necessarily landowning farmers. They're like migrant workers, and they're farm workers, or they're smallholders that don't have income security. And internationally speaking, especially when you look at the global South, agricultural sector is the one that has the most labor challenges, that pays the lowest, and that has the most gender inequality, among many other challenges. And so what we realized is that there was a way to highlight ethical supply chains that are equitable, sustainable, and traceable, as well as deliver on that mission that we talked about of reimagining ordinary and overlooked food, to create a line of spices for people. And this is very near and dear to my heart because spices are something that is so crucial to global flavors and global cuisines, which is where more and more the eater in America is leaning towards and moving towards is flavor and spices. And so we just launched our first kit, which is a Turkish spice blend kit with 3 different spices from southeastern Turkey. Our next one will likely be some very exciting ingredients from Mexico. And they're all ethically sourced from single origin producers that shorten the distance between farmer and eater, which also, very crucially, it gives you fresher, more flavorful spices. And we have recipes to go along with it, and media and storytelling on that platform. So if you like spices, go check out spices.sirkensingtons.com and get some inspiration.
Congratulations. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to try those out. Yeah. This show is all about being real. And we have the external conversations that we can hear each other. And there's also usually an internal dialogue that's happening as well. So I'm kind of curious to know what has been the real story for you that maybe we haven't heard in this hour in terms of maybe your dialogue, your internal dialogue over the last hour.
Yeah. Well, this goes back actually to the storytelling hack, which is, if you are telling a story, how do you lose yourself in the story? And talking about a state of flow, I actually love moments like this where we can be really choiceful about the words and the presence that we have, because I feel like it's the one time where I don't have an internal dialogue. I've always loved kind of being on stage and, in this conversation, not that I'm sort of positioning or massaging who I am or what I'm trying to say, but I can for a moment kind of get outside of my own head. So the short answer is not much has been going on in here. But also I'm always curious, well, shit, am I being real enough? Right. I talk about these things and these things are really important. But if I were to really look at, okay, what with self-compassion, what are the kind of, the leaks or the cracks, or what am I not really being objective about in what I share? Whenever I put something out there that is in essence, this is how the world works. Always a part of me is like, well, is that really the way the world works?
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe in a couple of years I'll reverse course on some of these things.
I like your perspective. It kind of goes full circle back to your am I being real story about how something deep down within you knew that something needed to give and change, but you didn't consciously know it. So I think the more real we can be with ourselves, the more we can challenge our own stories and our own narratives. I think a lot
and ask others to challenge us, right? Because we don't have an objective perspective, right? We can't be our own referee and our own judge and jury. It takes practice and it takes external counsel.
So the last question for you, you've essentially lived the American dream, at least from an outsider's point of view. You came up with an idea.
Well, I didn't start at the bottom, which really helps. I was very fortunate to be, born into a family with incredible love and means, and so not quite the American dream as my grandfather
Fair
did.
enough. But I appreciate you correcting me on that. Yeah. The American dream in the sense that you had an idea that was, when you came up with the idea, it was nothing, right? It was just an idea to maybe have a different type of ketchup out there, and you built it. You got it in stores all around the country, and you sold it to a massive corporation. And so my question for you to leave the listeners with is just an inspirational message about possibility.
I think possibility is really rooted in your tenacity. I think, my partner, Mark, at Sir Kensington, he has this great quote, which is, entrepreneur is just a fancy word for someone that doesn't take no for an answer. And I think that nothing we hit so many roadblocks, we heard no so many times, but we were maniacally dedicated to a very sort of straightforward vision. And it was about pouring our hearts and pouring resources into that. It doesn't mean we didn't take feedback. It doesn't mean we didn't adjust as we went along. We iterated many times, but that tenacity is really important, which is worth remembering and worth being reminded of when we think that so many things around us are overnight successes, right? so many companies that we see, that we hear of, that either like going public or they appear to be everywhere. Many of those companies are, 10, 20 years old, but you just only think that they're 3 years old. Many of the founders behind them and the team members that contributed behind them have had long careers with really rich experiences. And we have, I think, the American dream in some ways has been tainted by like a culture of like speed and expediency, but the tenacity and the fact that the journey is the reward that you're going to learn from is really crucial to manifesting your possibilities.
So good. The one and only Scott Norton. Scott, this was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thanks so much.